In the previous how-to videos you learned quite important things already. All these settings, however, are somewhat incomplete without actual email channels for the communication with your customer. Today I will show you how to configure and add Google-based mailboxes to Zammad's Google channel. This video will not help you if you're looking to hook up normal IMAP and POP3 mailboxes or Microsoft 365 based email accounts. If you're looking for those kind of channels, please watch the previous videos. The accounts I'm using for this demo are Google Workspace accounts from the starter package. Technically everything you will see will also work with the free Google accounts without any Workspace membership. Due to restrictions with Google's app configuration, your Zammad installation requires a valid and public top-level domain. That being said, Google does not require access to your Zammad instance. All redirects and communication is done via the user's browser or Zammad directly. Before we can add mailboxes to Zammad, we will have to create a Google app. To do so, go to console.cloud.google.com. Within the Google Cloud Console, now click on Select a project on the upper left. In the New dialog, you then have to create a new project in case you don't have one yet. After creating the new project, you will have to select it via Select a Project. Workspace users may have to switch the resource to the organization of their Workspace account to see the new project. Now open the burger menu and navigate to API and Services. In the new screen, click on OAuth consent screen and click on Get Started. This will open a dialog we will have to follow in order to create everything we need. First, choose a name of the app you're going to create and select an email address for the user's support. Ideally, this is not an administrator's personal one. Next up, you can choose what users should be able to use the Google app. Internal is fine as long as you only want your organization users to use it. If you select external, it will be available to other Google users too. However, this path involves verification processes. In this case I will be choosing internal because it's good enough for this scope. External should only be required if you're planning on using the same app for user authentication. Next you will have to provide one or more email addresses for Google to contact regarding any changes to the project. Now we can finally create the OAuth client. To do so, head to Clients and click on Create Client. Choose Web Application as application type and give it a meaningful name. Now head to the Google channel within the management of your Zammad installation. Here click on Connect Google App and copy the callback URL on the lower end of the new modal. Paste this callback URL as authorized redirect URL within the OAuth client creation screen within the Google Cloud Console. After clicking on Create, a new dialog opens. This dialog contains the client ID and client secret that Zammad requires in order to connect and communicate with Google. Copy both information in the fitting field within your Zammad instance. In the Google Cloud Console, then click on OK to close the screen. In Zammad, hit Submit to store the provided information. Now head back to APIs and Services via the burger menu. Finally, we can configure the grants Zammad requires by using the Enable APIs and Services button on the upper part of the site. Search for Gmail on the new page, click on Gmail API and then use the Enable button on the new page. Now you're all set to add your first Google email account to Zammad. Google client secrets do not expire, but Google does delete unused clients. Clients that haven't been used for 6 months will be deleted, with a 30-day upfront warning for you to react. To rotate your client secret from time to time, simply open Google's Cloud Console, navigate to APIs and Services and then Credentials. From there select your OAuth client you've created. In this new screen you can add a new secret. Use the secret and put it into the client secret field within Zammad's app configuration for the Google channel. After waiting some hours, it's safe to disable the old secret. After disabling it, you will be able to remove it. Usually the new credentials should automatically rotate. If the secret was revoked before, you will have to use the re-authentication buttons in the channel management. Now that we have the application and API connection set up, it's time to connect the first mailbox to it. By pressing Add Account, you will be redirected to Google's login page. Usually you can select already logged in accounts here or provide credentials to a different account. After authenticating, Google will redirect you back to your Zammad instance. The channel's mailbox configuration dialog will open, allowing you to configure the destination group, the option to change the outgoing email address of that destination group, a folder to look for emails, and the option to optionally keep the messages on the server. Generally, you should carefully decide if you want to keep all messages on the server. Over the time, your mailbox can get out of quota, which you have to monitor manually. Also, and this is important to note, if you choose to keep messages on the server, Zammad will only fetch unread emails. All mails that are read beside of Zammad will be ignored. After submitting these settings, Zammad will take its first look into the connected mailbox. If Zammad detects existing emails in your mailbox, it will also offer you to run an archive import on the mailbox. The archive import has serious advantages for older emails. You can tell Zammad what state these emails should be imported in. These tickets will be closed by default, which makes a lot of sense for archived emails. It will also cause no trigger-based messages and also no agent notifications to be created. This creates the least noise possible. In order for Zammad to pull only the right mails as archived emails, you will have to define the cutoff time. Every message that is older than this date and time will be considered an archived message. Anything after that will behave exactly like you would expect it to be in Zammad. Archived and closed tickets in general can always be found via Zammad's powerful full-text search. If you don't want Zammad to import messages in archive mode, use the skip button on the lower left. If you click on Submit instead, Zammad will run the archive mode in the way you configured it. After submitting, the channel will automatically be enabled and begin to fetch emails. That's basically all it takes to add a mailbox. Aliases that are configured for the mailbox will not be taken into account. Zammad will only add the primary email address. Google supports using their Relay SMTP server. This Relay service supports IP address or user-based authentication. The path depends on the requirements. In my case, I will be using API-based restrictions, which implies that I do not necessarily require user-based authentication. If you require audit logs in terms of relayed emails, you will have to use a user account. This account requires an active license and ideally is a dedicated send-out account. To configure relaying with Google, open the Google Workspace admin console and navigate to apps, Google Workspace and then Gmail. On this new screen, now click on Routing, which changes to another screen. Now click on Configure for the SMTP Relay Service option. This option may show Add another rule if you already are using the relay option for other services. In this new dialog, enter a meaningful description. For senders, I will be using only addresses in my domains, which allows me to use the IP-based limitation or user authentication. You can choose only registered apps users in my domains instead, but then will be forced to require authentication towards the relaying server. In the authentication section, enable only accept mail from the specified IP addresses and provider IP addresses of its Zammad server. This option allows you to provide IPv4 and IPv6 addresses as needed. If you're planning to use the user authentication, you can skip the use of the IP address limitation or just use it on top. For user authentication within the SMTP dialog, enable require SMTP authentication if needed. Last but not least, I strongly encourage you to enable require TLS encryption. This way you ensure that the communication between your Zammad server and Google is encrypted. After saving, Google might take a moment to apply your changes. Usually you should be able to use your relay configuration quickly though. Now head to the Google channel configuration within Zammad's management and change to the settings tab. Adjust the domain part of the notification sender setting to the Google domain that's configured for email and that you want to use. This step is crucial before we can continue. Of course, you can also change the email alias if needed. Hit submit and then change to the email channel and then back into the accounts tab. This is needed because the Google channel doesn't support notifications directly, which is why it's not shown on the other management pages. Scroll down to the email notification section if needed and click on Edit next to Outbound. Change the setting Send Mails Via from SendMail to SMTP. Now enter smtp-relay.gmail.com as a hostname. Provide user credentials in the user and password field if your Gmail relay requires SMTP authentication. If not, leave those two fields empty. Enter 587 as SMTP port and ensure that the SSL verification is set to yes. If you now click on Continue, Zammad will verify the sendout and close the dialog if the supplied information were correct. You should now be able to receive notification emails from your Zammad instance that are sent via the Google Relay service. Just as a side note for very busy installations, that would also send quite a lot of notifications. You could also configure, for example, a postfix server locally on the Zammad server that allows you to use SendMail. Google recommends reusing SMTP connections, so sending several mails over the same connection. Otherwise, you might receive penalties by Google. Managing Google channels is quickly explained. By using the Edit option next to Inbound, you can change the destination group and the corresponding outgoing email address of said group. Also, you can adjust the folder Zammad fetches emails from. You can also change the keep messages on server behavior. A fair word of warning on that regard. If emails were kept on the server before, changing this setting to no, so removing mails, will cause Zammad to fetch all messages from the mailbox. This might be unexpected to you, so remove all read emails to either a subfolder or remove them beforehand. Clicking on the group name basically gives you a small subset of the dialog you've just seen. You can adjust the destination group based information here as well. On the right hand side, Zammad lists all configured email addresses of the mailbox. You can add further email aliases here or remove existing ones. However, keep in mind that these aliases will have to exist in the user's configuration with the Google Workspace Admin Console too. Changes you applied may take some minutes until they are deployed. Zammad does not synchronize the available aliases and thus requires you to go that extra mile. Google does override aliases. Zammad provides you with email filters. These filters can change the way an incoming message is being processed. It can even be ignored entirely. Zammad also comes with some default internal filters that you cannot see in the UI nor adjust. They are responsible for example, the follow-up detection and such. These filters are global. This means that it doesn't matter in which of Zammad's available email channels you configure these. You can reach the same tab content within email channels, Google channels and both Microsoft 365 type channels. Filters are generally considered in the order of their alphabetical naming. They can be cloned and removed as needed. When adding a new filter, you can provide a meaningful name to it. Ideally, the filter name gives a short hint on what it does, so that you can find it better. In the Match All of the Following section, you can filter for messages with specific attributes like the from or to header. You can also choose from a list of predefined headers to interact based on specific values. In the Perform Actions section, you can define what Zammad should do with a message based on the matches. Filters can adjust ticket attributes and tags. This can be done both in context of a ticket creation or ticket update. This allows you to even run different actions depending on the situation. The only downside on this is that the UI currently doesn't help you to differentiate the configuration very well. Additionally to that, a filter can adjust the visibility, message type and sender of the article that is going to be created. The message type by default would be email in this situation, but you could manipulate it to, for example, a phone note. Within sender you can choose in between the three user types Zammad knows: customer, agent or system. The last very specific option is to ignore the message. Use this with care because anything that matches your filter will cause Zammad to silently discard affected messages. You can use the note field for useful information for other admins or yourself. A very simple filter example would be based on the spam header of emails. This header exists on most installations, but its name might differ depending on the mail system. If you receive a message that has been detected as spam, you can automatically add a tag named spam and move it to a specific group. Of course, you could also use this to automatically close the incoming mail if your filter basically never messes up. Signatures are a must-have for emails. Of course, Zammad supports signatures. They can be dynamic to a certain point and are set on a group level. Agent-based signatures are not possible, however can still offer some level of personality for individual agents thanks to variables. Unlike filters, signatures cannot be removed but cloned only. These signatures are global. That means it doesn't matter in which of Zammad's available email channels you configure these. You can reach the same tab content within email channels, Google channels and both Microsoft 365 type channels. The configuration of a new or existing signature is fairly easy. Give it a meaningful name and then configure the content of the signature. As mentioned, you can use variables. To open a list of these, you can use two columns just like with text modules in the front end. The editor in this model supports all formattings that Zammad supports in general. Right now, formattings can only be achieved with keyboard shortcuts. You can even paste inline images into a signature. However, more complex signatures with links and tables are rather complicated. While you can use your browser's developer tools to adjust HTML content, this is rather troublesome. Note that not all HTML structures will work, because Zammad has a sanitizer that might get in your way here. For the sake of the length of this video, I will not go in further detail here. To configure your signatures to a group, head to your group configuration and select the signature you want. Now the last part of the email channel is the Settings tab. Some of these settings are not available in Software as a Service because they are globally managed. These settings are global. That means that it doesn't matter in which of Zammad's available email channels you configure these. You can reach the same tab content within email channels, Google channels, and both Microsoft 365 type channels. As mentioned earlier, within the notification channel configuration, you can use the notification sender to adjust the sender address of the notification channel. By default, the value is notification master with no reply at systemfqdn of your Zammad installation. This value has to match the outgoing email configuration you have configured for notification, because otherwise the mail system will deny these notifications to be sent. With additional follow-up detection, you can configure how much data of an email Zammad uses to detect follow-ups on existing tickets. These settings can have a huge negative impact on the quality of detected follow-ups. By default, only subject and references is activated. It causes Zammad to check the subject of an email to find fitting existing messages and their message IDs. In some situations this is not enough. For this reason you can also use further references with the references setting. This will cause Zammad to also take message IDs from all articles of a ticket into account. That can be useful in some situations where email flows are rather chaotic. The next two options of the follow-up detection are rather dangerous and likely to cause false positive follow-ups. Use these with care. Attachments causes Zammad to look for references of messages with the attachment of a fetched email. For example, for messages that have been forwarded as an attachment. Last but not least, Buddy will look for ticket numbers and hooks in the body of a message. This one is the number one culprit for bad follow-up detections, because a simple phone number in the signature can cause Zammad to find a ticket number where there is none. This one should be your absolute last resort. Maximum email size defines the maximum allowed size of messages. By default this is 10 MB and can be a maximum of 150 MB. Please keep in mind that Zammad is not a file sharing platform and most email systems do allow something between 20 to 50 MB in total. Consider using tools that are made for sharing files, like Nextcloud, Cfile or similar. The maximum allowed email size setting has a direct data setting called Send Postmaster Mail if mail too large. The setting defaults to yes, which causes Zammad to automatically reply to the sender if the message was too big. The message requests the sender to reduce the message size and hints on the actual limit. Zammad installations that are older than Zammad 3.2 had a default of the setting set to no, to reflect the original behavior. Originally, Zammad would silently fetch the message and remove it from the mailbox if the keep messages on server setting was set accordingly and put the email into unprocessable mail. This has several downsides. The sender does not know that their message never came through and might expect an answer that never arrives. Also, the administrator has to take extra steps to drop the mail from unprocessables, causing extra workloads. Both scenarios are bad user experience, so my personal suggestion is to stick with yes here. With sender based on reply to header, you have important control over the way Zammad detects the ticket customer during the creation of a ticket. By default the setting is unset, which means disabled. However, you can configure Zammad to not just take the reply to header in consideration, but also if you just want the email address and display name that's configured there to be customer values. This is not just relevant for the ticket article itself, which will override the from attribute, but also will cause Zammad to create new customers of unknown addresses in the correct way. The downside on this is that the sender address is being different from the actual value, which may be confusing in abuse situations. Agents have to pay extra attention here. The correct and original values can always be retrieved via the raw message of the article itself. You may wonder why this is relevant. Well, most companies use contact forms that send emails. Many of these forms act like they are sending as the actual sender. This is bad behavior because you're sending as email domains you technically not own. For this reason, it makes more sense to use a no-reply email address as sender address of said form. As you can't answer your customers conveniently that way, it makes sense to use the reply to header for that. This is where the circle closes. Now let's come to a rather special setting for ticket creations by email. Customer selection based on sender and receiver list is only relevant if an agent sends an email to Zammad. With the default setting being set to yes, this means that if the sender is an agent, Zammad will use the first user in the recipient list to be the customer of the ticket. If you set this to no, Zammad will use the agent's email address as ticket customer, if that is the sender. Be aware that agents require access permissions on the group of affected tickets, because Zammad doesn't have a customer-specific interface. Otherwise, I cannot see the tickets they are customer in. As Zammad can reply to any incoming email based on triggers automatically, this can be an issue with certain email addresses. Usually it doesn't make any sense to reply to no-reply email addresses because they are used for sending email only. For this reason you can configure block notifications on on-premise installations to tackle this. Any alias on this list will not receive any notifications from Zammad. The default setting usually is good enough in most scenarios. Earlier we had a look on Zammad's display names for email addresses. I mentioned that by default, Zammad will combine the agent's name with a display name. This is globally controlled with the setting sender format. In many scenarios you might not want that the customer feels a somewhat soulless reply by a big ticket system. For this reason you might want to choose agent name as option here. However, the downside, especially with Outlook, is that the display name will be stored in its internal address book, so even if a different agent answers, the first agent that answered at some point will always be the displayed name from the support email address. This might be undesired, which is why you can also set the setting to system address display name. This is the exact name of what you can configure for the email address. Should you stick with Zammad's default setting to use the agent name with a separator and the system address display name, you may want to take a look at sender format separator. This allows you to adjust the separator in between those two values. By default this is wire. As Zammad basically is somewhat of an email client, it doesn't just support replying to emails, but also forwarding it. As any email client, Zammad appends specific default wording in the front of the subject if you're forwarding or replying to an email. This is controlled by ticket subject forward and ticket subject reply. If the default wording does not fit or you want to use a more specific one to your local language, you can adjust this with these two settings. The colon will automatically be added for you. Last but not least, Zammad limits its subject length to 110 characters by default. Using ticket subject size, you can adjust or decrease this limit as needed. If the subject is longer than the set limit, Zammad will shorten the string with an indication to ensure that the ticket slug and number, if enabled, is always visible. Note that this can also be troublesome if you communicate with a third-party ticket system. You may want to add both ticket numbers in front of the subject in these scenarios, to ensure the follow-up on both sides always works. There are some global settings you might not expect where to find them. As they are relevant for how Zammad behaves during the creation of email replies on a ticket, we should talk about these as well. These settings are available to any agent with administrator permissions. Administrators without access to tickets cannot adjust these. At the top within any ticket, you can find a little setting button 2. This will open a modal with ticket editor related settings. When replying to an email in a ticket, the easiest way to do so is by using the reply or reply all button in the ticket. You may have noticed that if you do, all that is available to you is the to and cc field. You can optionally enable the subject field. If the subject field is disabled, the ticket title will be the subject. If you enable the subject field, the ticket title and subject of the message can be independent. Keep in mind that if your customer can log in, they will still see the ticket title. This may be relevant in some cases where the ticket titles are too complicated for whatever reason. While we are talking about the ticket titles, these can be adjusted by clicking into the title area. Clicking anywhere outside of this area will update the ticket title. The setting email full quote is much more important in my opinion. While it is turned off by default, agents can always mark the relevant text portion and click on reply to create a quotation. Quoting in general helps, especially with long ticket emails, to help the customer understanding the points you refer to easier. Of course, you can also enable the full quote. If you do, Zammad will always add a full quote of the message that you're using the reply button on. Don't worry, you can still select only a subportion of the text to only quote the relevant parts. Of course, you can also always break a quotation in smaller parts. The last email relevant setting is email quote header. This allows you to disable the header Zammad adds to a quotation by default. This can be useful if you are not planning to tell the customer who exactly answered. These settings can be a game changer in the use of Zammad, so I hope they help you as well. Now that was quite a big chunk of settings. There's more settings that are hidden and only available via Zammad's Rails console. If you're using Zammad software as a service, drop the support a message if you want these to be adjusted. The following settings are related to emailing mainly, so I will not handle all available settings in Zammad here. Most companies that don't just handle support, but also financial data and depending on their location, are required to archive emails. Now there's several ways to do this and this is no legal consultation. But at least for outgoing, the easiest approach might be to send all outgoing emails to an archive email mailbox via blind carbon copy. You can check the current value with setting get system_bcc. By default this will be empty. You can set your system BCC address like so. After setting this, Zammad will send a copy of all new outgoing emails to this address. A very crucial and helpful setting in my opinion is the option to also display the customer's email address during the ticket creation. This is extremely useful, especially if you have several customers with similar names and to verify the search returned the correct values. Enable UI User Organization Selector with email by setting it to true. Disable it by using false, that is also the default. You can configure the font and font size Zammad shall use with HTML email CSS font. Please be aware that the font you choose here has to be supported by the receiving client. You should always also configure fallback fonts. Also, there's a huge difference in between px, so pixels, and pt, so points. Microsoft Office, for example, uses points over pixels, so the behavior might differ greatly if you stick with pixels here. This setting has an impact on outgoing emails only. It will not change any fonts in Zammad's user interface. The last very useful setting affects attachments in a ticket. Depending on how many articles you have in a ticket, the overview of all attachments of all articles gets somewhat lost. Zammad comes with the setting UI Ticket Zoom Sidebar Article Attachments that enables an attachment listing in the ticket sidebar. That way you have a chronicle list of attachments at hand. Please note that this does not cover inline attachments. Now you know how to configure, add and manage Google Mailboxes in Zammad. Until next time, take care.